Welcome to the BeWell program. My name is Dr.TedBender. I'm a clinical psychologist and CEO of the BeWell Network. If you or a loved one is struggling, please visit us at BeWellRecovery.com. My goal on this show is to educate as many people as I can who are struggling with mental health. There is help for the many life obstacles that we endure. Today, I am very pleased to bring to the show Cheryl Burke. Cheryl, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Cheryl, you've had an amazing career as a professional dancer. You are the star coach on ABC's Dancing with the Stars. You were the first female professional to win the show and the first professional to win twice and consecutively. How did your passion for dance even begin? Take us back.
All right. Well, I started dance at age 4. My mom put me in every curricular activity you can possibly think of, from ballet, basketball, soccer, horseback riding, piano, you name it. And dance was the only thing I never complained about. So dance was definitely a huge part of the whole family, really. I started ballet from 4 to 11 and then literally grew out of my tights. And my mom and stepdad at the time decided to take on ballroom dancing and try and find a sport for the family. We tried golf. That didn't work. So ballroom dancing was the way to go. I didn't at first. I wasn't 100% in because I was like, ballroom dancing is definitely for old people. I didn't realize that there was a whole category for juniors and kids. And when I went to a local dance studio or dance competition in the Bay Area where I'm from, I saw kids my age dance and with fun music and costumes and makeup, and I was like, sign me up. So I started competing professionally, or more around the circuit, I guess, not professional yet, at age 12. So that requires, in the ballroom industry, that requires lots of travel throughout the country and Europe. And so I would spend my summers in England, basically training. And then after high school, I asked my mom if I could just take a year off to focus on my competition career. And then that led to me turning professional. I lived in Denmark, I've lived in Harlem, I've lived everywhere you could possibly think of. And then Dancing with the Stars came around as I was a professional. I was already competing professionally from like age 20 to 21. And I moved to Los Angeles in 2006 thinking that I was only going to be a part of the show for one season. And now I am heading, maybe, I can't announce anything yet, depending on when this airs, but I am heading into my 26th season.
Wow, that's incredible. Congratulations on all of your success.
Thank
You've also become quite the advocate for mental health and recovery. When did you get into that? What brought you to that point? Why is it important for you to advocate for mental health and sobriety?
Yeah, well, I got sexually molested when I was a little girl, when I was 4 years old, testified against my molester in court at age 8 to 9.
Wow.
My mother always made sure I was in therapy, so I'm grateful for that. And then I took it upon myself to continue the therapy because I did feel, especially moving from, going into the competition circuit and then coming to Los Angeles, all of a sudden, we're on a hit show that's #1 in primetime television, getting crazy attention. And I'm very much an introvert. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know how to handle all of that. And then I realized, wait a second, I never drank as a competitor because that wasn't an option. But then I started abusing alcohol and it became like an everyday thing. And I realized, I'm just really numbing and I'm just not happy, from the inside, looking inside myself. And I'm like, there's something that's just not comfortable or not sitting well with me. And so I decided to take it upon myself to find a therapist here in Los Angeles. And I've now been with my cognitive therapist for the past decade. And I also have a somatic experiencing practitioner as well.
How old were you when alcohol started becoming a problem?
I never knew it was a problem,
Yeah.
right? So I was very much a functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
So meaning like what you see, I basically was the same person, right? Mm-hmm. So there was nothing, I was never that person that was out of control. But then I realized after my real father passed away, I don't believe it's hereditary, but my father was an alcoholic. And after he passed away, I just had gotten engaged and I was like, you know what, I'm drinking every single day. Mm-hmm. And I realized, and I kind of made a promise to myself, didn't even tell my fiance at the time, I just wanted to see if I could stop for a day or a week. And then it went on for a long time. I also had a severe allergic reaction to the alcohol when I got back. after burying my father in Thailand, and it was interesting. I think it was literal, like my body was telling me, stop poisoning your body. It was like anything that I drank, I tried a shot of, whiskey, I tried a shot of tequila, like no matter what, which is really weird for me because I thought I could handle my liquor. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I started busting out into hives. Mm-hmm. And so I decided just to stop. And that's kind of my mentality. I don't really have a story that I can say where I had to crash and burn before I decided to stop drinking. Yeah. This was for vanity reasons, to be quite honest. And I stopped, and then I just realized I never missed it.
And how long ago was that when you stopped?
I've been a little over 4 years sober now.
Congratulations. That's fantastic to hear. So you've been very open about your sobriety, which I really applaud you for, because one of the key goals for me on this show, if not the major and only goal, is to help reduce stigma around mental health and addiction. And when celebrities like yourself come on and talk, so freely and openly about their own struggles, it really helps people to understand that, hey, this affects anybody and everybody. The general feel out there is that, addiction only happens to homeless people or living under a bridge, or it only happens to really bad people. But no, it's indiscriminate. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't matter it doesn't care if you're a homeless person or a famous TV celebrity or a lawyer or a doctor or a nurse. I've worked with them all. And it can creep into your life in many different ways. It sounds like for you, it started to, with kind of dealing with the pressures you were under. You mentioned being kind of an introvert. Alcohol maybe helped loosen you up a little bit, and then it kind of just spirals from there.
To be quite honest, I sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
To be quite honest, I do believe addiction is a disease, and it's something that no matter what, I will always be an addict, but I will not always be an active addict, right? Like in that sense, as far as drinking. I'm in the 12-step program, and there's been a lot of work that I've needed to do, and I know it's an everyday process, but I do believe, going back to what you were saying, homeless, not homeless, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying one is worse than the other either, but with someone who it may look from the outside that I am successful and all of that, the worse it could be because of that, right? Like, especially in my case, when I'm a functioning alcoholic, nobody knew when I was drinking. So it was not like I was intentionally or consciously hiding it. It was the fact that when I wasn't drinking, people would come up to me and be like, "Are you okay? Because you're so quiet," So it's like, it became like, and to be honest, I lived like an Olympian during my competitive years. And then coming here, it was like a get out of jail free card. And I honestly was able to go to clubs, and I was able to have all this freedom. And I guess it was easier to mask, put it that way.
So prior to coming out here, you had kind of an Olympian mentality with your training.
Yeah.
And then once you kind of came on to Dancing with the Stars, no one was pushing you as hard in your training. You had a little more free time and lost that structure in a way.
Yeah. It's like, we all of a sudden, all of us pro dancers, the original cast, the OGs, we got into clubs, we had free bottle service. Yeah. And it was like, and then I, was obviously masking the pain from my, of me being sexually abused when I was a kid, never dealt with that as an adult. My mother and father's divorce at age 2, my abusive mentally and physically relationships I got into back to back when I was in high school. And even that last partnership I had before moving here, there was a lot to numb. And I did a really great job. I always say that I was a professional number, and it was something that I would easily resort to that instead of feel my feelings.
I've been working in the addiction field specifically for about 15 years now. And I would say the vast majority of the patients that I've worked with, at least 70 to 80%, have experienced one or more unresolved childhood traumas that kind of, so your path, while unique in your success and your career and the things that you've done, is actually very similar to many people who I've talked to who were abused or neglected or any one of the things that can lead to, struggles with addiction.
Absolutely.
Again, what I was saying is, how important it is for people like you coming on and talking about this so openly and so freely, and how it helps to really reduce that stigma. What advice would you give to our listeners out there? Maybe things that have worked for you. You mentioned, going to meetings, but what advice do you have for others who are listening now to help get and to stay sober?
It's one day at a time. I guess people in the slang, I guess people say, oh, I was a dry drunk because I didn't join the 12-step program until recently. And mind you, that alone has been a journey. Like I started it, stopped it while I was going through, and still am going through this divorce that I'm going through. And then on top of it, started again, right? So every day, is a different day, and you have to treat it as that. And when things get overwhelming, if I were to say to you a statement like, I'm never drinking again, that type of stuff makes me want to drink, because it's like, I'm never drinking again. All we can do in general is live as we are today, because we actually don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and we can't change the past, so there's no point. And I need to practice what I preach, because man, it's really hard, because it's hard not to have anxiety about the future, but we can't control much, right? We actually can't control the future. So what we can do though is just live today. And if it's minute by minute, hour by hour, so be it. If that's what's going to stop, I guess, the feeling of feeling overwhelmed. And when I feel overwhelmed or stressed or have anxiety, that's the first thing maybe, or the first few things I think of is drinking. Because that really was a great numbing device. And now I resort to other, I guess, self-help tools, like transcendental meditation has definitely helped me. I started that in January when my ex and I separated, and I credit that a lot. Knowing that there is a power greater than you really helps as well. And that is a part of the 12-step program. Knowing that, at the end of the day, yes, you still have to be active with your own sobriety, but you got to turn it over, because there is a power greater than you, whether you want to call it God or even your AA program or whatever it is, it's irrelevant. I think that is very important. And that was the key to me really staying consistent this past 4 years.
You mentioned working with a cognitive therapist, and one of the things you mentioned a second ago is one of the more distorted things that I would hear patients say, and that was and is, I know I'm never going to drink again. When people would say that to me, and patients would say that to me, I think that they would think that they were making a statement to me, trying to convince me, right?
Yes. But, I got them fooled. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say back to them very clearly, how do you know? You don't know what's going to happen 10 minutes from now. How can you predict the future? A counter or a challenge to that cognitive distortion really is, I hope that I don't drink again, and I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent it. A much more accurate thought, right? So I thought that was interesting. You mentioned, being in support groups, and you mentioned being a dry drunk. For our listeners out there, what that really means is that you just quit drinking. And in and of itself, very difficult, very challenging, but not really working.
You're not being active.
Yeah, you're not addressing.
Sobriety.
You're not addressing the underlying cause. Is kind of what they mean by that. So thank you.
Mind you, in my situation, and specifically, because I can't speak for anybody else, but most of the 4 years was me being a dry drunk, if you want to label it. But mind you, I still was in therapy, right? So whether it was a therapist that really focused on sobriety or she was a specialist is irrelevant. I was always doing the work. I think whenever I felt like that, I would turn to her, to my cognitive therapist. So as far as labeling me as a dry drunk, it doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can just rephrase it as you stopped drinking. And then a little bit later, started.
But that's my personality. Yeah. I go either all or nothing, and that is also, I've realized with a few of my friends who are also addicts, that's our personality.
One thing that a lot of patients that I've worked with, especially with alcoholism, they get really worried about. You get some sober time under your belt, and then eventually you return to normal life. And you're out in social situations, especially for you, you're, literally out in California and Hollywood and on television. What do you do to stay sober in those social situations when other people may be drinking or to excess?
That's a great question. I actually got diagnosed with social phobia because I think it's not, again, it's a label, but it's also a real thing. It's a real issue.
Very true.
Ever since I've been sober, my mentality has changed as far as social groups go. Because like I said, I'm an introvert. So I always thought, like, going to red carpets, I am a hot mess with getting ready. Like, it's not my favorite thing to do. Yeah. I definitely don't love that type of attention. I don't mind it. Like when I'm dancing, and I've always said dancing has saved my life. Like I don't mind dancing in front of millions of people for some reason. But I do know why, but for actually standing in front of a bunch of people with cameras in their face is not necessarily something that sits well with me and never will. I don't think I'll ever get used to it. However, I signed up for this and I'm grateful for the experience, but I used to drink my way just to get through it, right? Yeah. So when it comes to social settings, recently I actually went out with a few of my girlfriends who are also divorced, but they're not sober. And I just tried it out because I feel the most comfortable and most, I guess, the real Cheryl is here in my home, right? So I don't necessarily love to go out. And does it paralyze me, my social phobia? No, I still go to work, I show up, and once in a while I will agree to going out, but you'll never see me in a club. You'll never see me anywhere where I'm triggered. So that's any time after 10:30, I've realized.
So you've really come to realize what your triggers are, how to get through some of those situations, how to avoid being in situations that are highly triggering, and you kind of circumnavigated it in that way. And
slowly going there. Like I'd rather have social phobia than say that I drank again.
Yeah, gotcha. Do you speak a lot about sober living for women? Are you advocating for sober living homes for women, or what is your involvement in that?
I'm not so familiar because I've never been to a rehabilitation center. Right. And I just know, though, that it is, and I know with this pandemic that the statistics of just drinking in general for a lot of adults have gone up tremendously. I am totally for sober living, and I know a lot of my family members who have been a part of it, and it really starts with you, though, no matter what, right? Like if you could be, whether that be like your family saying, you know what, you've got to check yourself in, like you're an adult and you have to, first it comes with acknowledgement and it comes with accountability. If you don't know that you have an issue or that addiction is possibly something that you suffer from, then the sustainability won't last very long, right? So I think no matter what, whether you could be wherever, like it doesn't matter if you're home, if you decide not to go to a sober living, or if you're in sober living, you gotta just take accountability over your own actions in order to, create a sober life.
Exactly. Switching gears a little, in recent interviews, I've seen you talk about women today suffering from body dysmorphia.
Something I always also suffer from.
Do you think that it's worse today in this day and age because of social media? What are your thoughts around that topic?
Yeah, social media, if you're in the business, same thing here. It goes way back for me. I can only speak off of my experience, but I started in the competitive world of ballroom dance, and even in ballet. I developed at a very young age. I went through what women go through, their menstrual cycle at age 9. And so I grew out of my tights, like literally already had hips, had basically the body I have now when I was 9 years old. And so it's hard because we're also in front of mirrors as a dancer constantly. You're constantly comparing one another, regardless, your subconscious is at least. And then when it comes to ballroom, like you don't really see curvy women as much as you see like stick thin women, right? And so like it was always this constant weigh-in for me with my coach. And I know that with this whole industry comes like, yes, I am using my body. Like at the end of the day, we are athletes, but I'm also very naturally curvy, so I can't change. And I guess I always looked at myself in the mirror like as if I was less than because of it. Because my coach would harp on me. I'm not blaming him at all by any means, but I'm just, I definitely know it comes from before even this Hollywood lifestyle that I've been a part of for the last 16 years. But, again, it's an everyday process. Like currently in therapy, I'm working on really loving that girl that throws those tantrums, that feels insecure. And instead of just like pushing her to the side and, alienating her or abandoning her, it's just like, it's really retraining your brain to think differently and to whatever it is, if it's not the language I'm speaking now that makes sense, it all means the same thing. You just got to somehow make it sense for you, because we can fight her all day long, or that little person inside of you all day long, and it's really going to get us nowhere and might even drive somebody to drink again or use.
Cheryl has brought up a lot of good points, and to our listeners out there, she has mentioned social phobia, which is an anxiety disorder, body dysmorphia, and the importance of getting help for dealing with those issues, because a lot of people who are suffering from active and severe substance use disorder and alcoholism are using it in a way that you mentioned, to numb. You mentioned being a professional number. And getting those issues treated often is the key to lasting success in sobriety. What about, continuing on that line or that topic with body dysmorphia, how do you think social media specifically is affecting that for young girls in today's age?
I think that the definition of beauty is not attainable. It's not realistic.
Yeah.
And with all these editing apps like Facetune and I do it sometimes too. Like it's like perfectionism is what we all suffer from, yet it's not real. There's no such thing. Right. So I think that in society today, especially in the United States, we congratulate people for feeling stressed out, or you're a hustler, but really your body is telling you something that you should probably listen to, right? So for example, as a dancer, somebody's always ready to take your job, right? And so if you twist an ankle, that's fine. I got another ankle. It's like you just continue to push your body when your body's telling you to stop. And I think with today's society, it's like if we consistently look at Barbie doll, right? Like who's just not attainable whatsoever. And that is the picture of what beauty is. And we look at magazines, we look at social media, and everyone's face tuning their face. And nowadays you can also face tune the video to where your waist could be like half the size. Really? It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's addicting. And I definitely suffered from that, to the point now where I've hired people because they are going to do the whole like picture posting, because I will get fixated on something and I'll see something. Like one time somebody was saying to me, your forearm looks so crazy right now, because I was trying to shrink like my bicep. And then all of a sudden, when you do that, you shrink your everything, right? And then my forearm looked like a stick. And it was like, okay, this is not good for my mental health. So I chose to no longer be in charge of this. And I still come up with the content, but when it comes to looking at myself for more than just a few minutes, I can't do it.
I hear you. And, you mentioned something earlier too about ballet, how there was mirrors everywhere. Now it's a similar concept, right? It's like, it's the mirror, except now it's not just you seeing it, it's the whole world seeing it on these social platforms. I've been working with people more recently on digital addiction. That's not yet a term that's actually
that's a real thing.
Yeah, it's getting out of control. And I recently did a spot on A&E's digital addiction, a new show that's a spin-off of Intervention. And it is becoming a really ruthless problem. People spending 10, 12, 14 hours a day in front of their screens. And this
is why I refuse to do a dating app, because I don't even, so when I post, I post, but I don't scroll. Like that's my rule. I can't do it.
Yeah. And it's causing a lot of problems for people. And what concerns me more than anything else is, young teens and kids who are going through this because of that type of scrutiny and, that unattainable perfection you mentioned, but also online bullying is a big problem. When I was a kid, if you got bullied, you settled it on the playground. These days, it's nonstop 24/7 cycle of bullying, and it's not one app anymore; it's 10 apps.
When I started Dancing with the Stars in 2006, my mother, I had to tell her to stop, but this was before social media.
Yeah.
So it was message boards. And any negative comment, my mom would literally send it to me. And I was like, you actually have to stop because that doesn't help me. Right. Like, and then, you know, I'm not blaming my mom either, but I do at least. So sometimes I take it off my phone during the season because I know that I'll get so fixated on the 1 or 2 negative comments, yet there'll be 2,000 beautiful comments and I won't even care about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was recently just talking with NBA superstar John Sally, and he mentioned, you know, when he was playing for the Pistons and the Bulls and the Lakers back in the day, there was no social media and cell phones and all that, but he would just eliminate the critics, wouldn't read the sports paper, didn't listen to any of the sports news for a very similar reason.
But that's addicting. Like, it's addicting to hear people's feedback, but really, again, it just takes work, but you have to find that all of that reassurance has to come from within.
Yes. So you're obviously an advocate for therapy and for getting help for struggling with mental disorders and substance use. Is there any books out there that you would recommend that you really like for people who are struggling? Anything that comes to mind?
Let me look at my Audible. Seriously, I am like so addicted to Audible, because I am also ADHD, so I can't like sit still, let alone sit with a book. So right now I'm currently reading Attached by Amir Levine. This is a good one. It talks about your attachment styles. So you're either avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, or secure attachment. Anxious. Another one that I read, I love all of Brene Brown, obviously.
Me too.
I love, what's his name? What's his name? The Power of Regret is a good one too. What is his name? Untamed by Glennon Doyle, but there's another one that I definitely need to say. But I found him actually through Tony Robbins had this this conference thing that I was looking at on YouTube, and Michael Singer, he's a great guy. Yeah, he's got some really cool stuff. He's the one that first brought to my attention that we're not our thoughts.
Yeah.
And wait, can you speak more about that? What do you think of that?
Well, you know, we have all kinds of intrusive thoughts that come to us throughout the day. You know, one example is have you ever stood on top of a tall building or edge of a cliff? Sometimes people have the thought, I should just jump. It doesn't mean you're suicidal. It doesn't mean that you want to die. You just have an intrusive thought that pops into your mind. It doesn't mean you want to kill yourself. But
no, you're not that thought.
Exactly. You're not that thought. But for people who suffer from mental health disorders, they have a higher volume of those intrusive thoughts. Very negative, very distorted, and they happen more often than someone who maybe isn't suffering from those types of disorders.
But don't you think that is the reason why people do maybe commit? No, it's not one reason. It's not black or white, but that suicide is definitely. I mean, the statistics of suicide in general has gone up, but I do believe that if we were taught that this in school, like in grade school, that we're not our thoughts, and we were able to consciously practice observing the thoughts, for example, then being the thought, I think that would have helped a lot, and it still can if that happens. But I think it helps a lot to know that when it comes to mental health, because it really, like the feelings as well, like feelings come and go. There's no feeling that will ever stay in your body longer than a few minutes.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I've been a huge advocate of putting in CBT programs into grade schools and middle schools.
That's way more important.
Yeah. I spent many years as a suicide researcher, you know, through graduate school and for the Department of Defense and for the military. And I can tell you, you know, it's much more common to have thoughts of suicide than actually attempting and dying by suicide.
Because people are scared to do that.
It goes against all logical reasoning of human life on Earth is to survive. To circumnavigate that actually takes tremendous practice and time. And that's what people think it's just some impulsive thing, but it's not. It starts with thoughts, and over time people become more comfortable with those thoughts if they're having them a lot. But it's a big difference between having thoughts and actually creating a plan for an attempt or gathering materials for an attempt or thinking I'm going to do it this way on Wednesday when my mom goes to work. Very different.
Writing a letter, that's a lot.
It's very different. But most people that attempt or die by suicide, they've convinced themselves cognitively through tremendous distortion that everybody in their life would be better off if they were gone. So imagine if you can really convince yourself of that, you could see why they could come to that rationalization. And the other significant distortion they have oftentimes is that they're a burden on others. That's why we see a lot of suicide in white males over 60, 65 years old, because they get sick or ill, or they depend heavily on their families to take care of them. That perceived burdensomeness is also another real risk factor for suicide. You have your own podcasts as well, right?
Yes.
You have 2 of them,
Yeah.
I believe, right?
No, I mean, so I've had 3 with iHeart, which has been so therapeutic and wonderful, all 3. But this latest one that has been out now for a few months, since May of this year, Burke in the Game. So it started off as like, let's get Cheryl back in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've been going through this divorce, it was basically this beginning stages of the divorce was when we started this podcast. And it was just like, maybe we need to do like a live interactive dating type thing. But then I realized as I was spending more time alone that I'm not ready to date, and I still am not, right? So the thought of it actually makes me want to throw up a little bit. So I'm like, clearly I'm not ready. And I do believe that because I was the type of person in a relationship that would give,
Yeah.
I definitely I owe that to myself, to give back to myself. And in order to change the pattern in my brain to stop dating the same type of men, I have to be proactive in my self-help and work, So I'm trying to slowly retrain it, and I've got to give it the time it needs. And it's not an overnight process, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Any upcoming projects, things you're working on that you want our listeners to know about?
So I will be, as far as new projects go, I mean, it's my 26th time doing this, but it's always a different experience. I'm going to be a part of Dancing with the Stars season 31. That's now on Disney Plus, no longer on ABC. And, it's interesting because I've been a part of the show for so many seasons and years. Since I was 21, I'm 38. And it's every partner I've had, whether he was my favorite or not, is irrelevant. It's more about like the lesson learned. A few years ago, I wrote this book called Dancing Lessons, and every chapter was about a dance you've seen us do on Dancing with the Stars and the characteristics of it and the partnership that would remind me of the certain dance. And, life may throw curveballs at you, or you may not like the situation when you see it on paper, but there's always a reason for it. Even those low moments of whether that is, drinking or relapsing, like everything happens for a reason. My divorce, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you just have to have faith.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about Burke in the Game. I'm really interested to hear more about this podcast and what you guys talk about.
Yeah. So, at first the Burke in the Game was about dating and like getting Cheryl back in the game, but it started out to be, now it's kind of transitioned, and it will eventually be an interactive podcast when I am ready to date. But since I'm not, we've had amazing guests from Ian Vincent. She does a lot of stuff with Oprah. We've had, my best friend, Leah Remini, like people who really have influenced me, Peter Crone, who is a mastermind. I've just learned so much. And I think right now in my life, I'm a sponge and I crave just new information, and I'm so hungry to learn, and I'm really curious about how our brain works and all that. So there's that, and that uploads every Tuesday. And for about a decade now, I basically came up with an idea of a therapeutic movement program, right? And because I know from firsthand experience that dance has saved my life, and I want to be able to change other people's lives by the power of movement. And I'm very careful with not saying the word dance, because dance is very intimidating, especially for men.
Yes.
And the type of dancing that I do requires a partner, but not for body language is what the program is called. And I'm hoping to launch this. We just shot the beta test, so we're going to be testing it now, but we're going to be hopefully launching this next year, which has been a long time coming, because this is something I'm really passionate about. There's not only cognitive talk therapy that's available. There's therapy through movement. There's therapy through animals. There's, like what I'm doing, somatic therapy as well. And that is basically, I do have a somatic experiencing practitioner attached to body language. And I just know that there is a way. Now, it's been very hard for me to just launch it because there's so much detail, but it doesn't require a partner. You can do it at the comfort of your own home. In the comfort of your own home, even at work in the bathroom stall, if you need to just release some stress and you want to like change your mood, whatever it is just an app or website, we don't know yet, that will definitely help change your mood instantaneously.
That's really fascinating. And yeah, I've worked in a lot of facilities where we had the kind of the core delivery system of the clinical programming, which was usually CBT based or DBT based, but we also had a lot of ancillary things that the patients could work on as well. Like you mentioned, working with animals and equine therapy, and we had yoga, and what you're describing sounds a lot very similar to that.
And it'll be affordable. Therapy, and I know firsthand as well, is really expensive, especially if you don't take insurance. So
yes, it is. Thank you so much again, Cheryl, for being on the program today. It was so good to get to know you and hear your story. And thank you again for putting yourself out there and advocating for mental health. It goes a long way in helping others to make a positive choice.
Thank you for having me.
To our listeners and viewers, please like and subscribe to our channel to stay informed. You are not alone. A better tomorrow is real. Until next time, I'm Dr. Bender. Be well.